What do customizable characters in video games have to do with human rights or mental health? Well, they might just be lifesavers for transgender gamers. Today I'm going to be exploring the world of transgender representation in video games. Video games are massively influential. Like other media and art forms, they are mirrors of our culture. While exploring, I'm going to see if I can answer this question. How has transgender representation in video games evolved in the past 5 years, and to what extent has it both helped progress and prolonged ongoing challenges faced by the trans community? Growing up as a non-binary and gender-fluid gamer, I often felt compelled to more ambiguous characters like the Little Pink Ball, Kirby, or masculine characters like Shadow the Hedgehog, despite the fact that I was assigned female at birth. The absence of characters that reflected my identity was isolating and frustrating, especially when I was still figuring stuff out. Societal standards expected me to be a Princess Peach girl, let alone not expect me to play video games at all. I also found comfort in games that allowed for character customization, such as The Sims and Soul Calibur 3. Character customization wasn't something I just fooled around with. I spent hours meticulously changing fine details as a means of expression. However, I've also encountered transphobia and sexism in online gaming spaces, which is why I am curious about the negative and positive aspects of gaming for transgender and gender diverse gamers. I want to critically examine this. How games perpetuate stereotypes and marginalization while also recognizing the art form's potential as a method of healing and community. To do this, I'm going to start with the history of transgender representation within video games. So the first game I want to touch on is the lesser-known indie game called Caper in the Castro, released in 1989 by transgender video game designer C.M. Ralph. It features Tessie LaFemme, a drag queen, and the main character's best friend. This entire game was groundbreaking for its time. It was initially released for Mac, and when you downloaded it from a floppy disk, it asked you to donate funds to an organization that assisted in the AIDS epidemic. Tessie LaFemme was said in some online spaces to be the first transgender video game character in history, but before CM Ralph retired, they corrected this misconception by clarifying that Tessie is a drag queen. The actual groundbreaking transgender representation here is from CM Ralph himself and the queer themes they implemented into the game, including activism in the form of fundraising for a community that was hit so hard by AIDS in the 80s and 90s. The reason why Tessie LaFemme was considered one of the first, if not the first, transgender character before CM Ralph clarified that she was just a drag queen, it was because a year prior, Nintendo released Super Mario Bros. 2, and the character Birdo became one of the most well-known early examples of transgender representation in the future, and is considered to be the first transgender character in a video game ever today, by a mass amount of people. To be more specific and quote the manual, Birdo thinks he is a girl and he spits eggs from his mouth. He'd rather be called Birdetta. In later prints of the manual, the second sentence was taken out and it is no longer considered canon. And because of this description, Birdo has been embraced as a trans icon, but the portrayal in the manual highlights how gender expression and identity were really trivialized in the past, especially in the 80s. Throughout the years, Nintendo explored how to describe Birdo's character in different ways in different games, including noting her gender as indeterminate. Personally, I'm on the side of embracing Birdo as a trans femme icon, and I think we can all agree that language and attitudes have evolved over time. Japan is not immune to trans misogyny and has evolved with the rest of the world in terms of awareness of trans issues. Nintendo mostly avoids speaking about Birdo and her gender identity aside from descriptions within some games where she is a recurring character, but Nintendo has been very aware of other cult followings of their characters and even implemented a second transgender character within the Mario universe when they released Paper Mario Thousand Year Door in 2004. Nintendo even confirmed that the character Vivian is transgender in their newest remake of the game for the Switch this year. The 1990s produced more controversial portrayals such as Flea from Chrono Trigger, released in 1995. Flea is an antagonist and shapeshifter in the game. He physically presents as a woman, identifies as a man, and expresses indifference to the concept of gender. There are some differences between the American and Japanese releases due to Nintendo of America's policies on explicit content. For example, Flea uses a feminine first-person pronoun in the Japanese release, but in the American release, many of Flea's personal quirks were lost due to the policies. Many critics have brought up this character as a harmful trope towards transgender people, as it stereotypes them as tricksters and villains. More recently, designers have considered more transgender characters in their games, specifically a higher rate of trans men, trans masc, and non-binary characters. The character Tyler Ronan in the game Tell Me Why, released in 2020, became the first openly transgender man to star in a video game. His story was written in consultation with GLAAD, an LGBTQ advocacy organization. This character representation provided a sensitive and authentic depiction of a trans man navigating his past and family relationships. Another recent character, Bloodhound from Apex Legends, was released in 2019. They are a non-binary character who uses they/them pronouns, marking a massive moment in mainstream gaming. Bloodhound's inclusion demonstrated a growing effort to normalize non-binary identities within the industry. Despite these efforts, transgender representation in video games remains uneven. There is a notable lack of trans men, transmasculine, and non-binary characters, as well as characters who identify as gender fluid or other gender diverse identities. In contrast, trans women, trans feminine characters, and drag queens have received relatively more attention. However, these characters are often portrayed with problematic tropes. Similarly to other media like film and television, trans masc characters have less visibility, while trans femme characters are designed as caricatures. We can see this parallel throughout film history. The Rocky Horror Picture Show, Mrs. Doubtfire, and White Chicks are all notable films. And while these films are comedic, entertaining, and sometimes even loved by the queer community, trans femme characters in video games are treated similarly, making the characters sassy villains or plot pieces for comedic relief. They are caricatures because they exaggerate and reinforce stereotypes of trans femme identities being a method of deviance or deception. The difference between genuine representation and tokenism can significantly impact how gender-diverse players see themselves in gaming. Tokenism happens when representation feels shallow, added only to appear inclusive without genuinely reflecting the diversity of real experiences. Researcher Lauren Lacey calls this the checkbox approach, where queer or non-binary identities are treated as a feature on a character sheet, lacking depth or authentic integration into the story or gameplay. In contrast, authentic representation brings marginalized identities to life as an essential part of the narrative, and this representation is commonly handled with care and sincerity. Serona Ryan from Hogwarts Legacy, which was released in 2023, is a clear example of tokenism. She is the first transgender character in the Harry Potter universe. Serona's identity is briefly mentioned in passing. It has no deeper role in the story, and critics argue that her inclusion was reactionary rather than a sincere effort towards diversity. This minimal effort has been perceived as insensitive when considering the context of J.K. Rowling's repetitive transphobic remarks and actions. It makes including this character seem more like damage control to the Harry Potter franchise than actual meaningful storytelling. Another trope noted by researcher Hibby Thatch is the wrong body trope. This trope in media is presented as a trans person whose entire storyline is centered around the concept of gender dysphoria, that they are trapped in the wrong body, and that their whole existence revolves around fixing this problem, in quotes, through medical transition. This trope seems exploitative to trans identities because it portrays the trans experience as something that is only unhappy, which reduces the trans experience as a whole to something negative. It also portrays the trans experience as just dysphoria, which is untrue because not all trans people experience dysphoria, and dysphoria is also experienced on a spectrum, as some people experience it more severely than others. Being trans is so much more than that because it is also about expression, self-actualization, and community. The character Naoto Shirogane from Persona 4 is presented in this way while also using a reveal and ambiguity trope by writing her character as having gender dysphoria but not identifying her as transgender or gender diverse at all. The character was designed to be considered a boy throughout the entire game by the player, Then at the end of the game, they reveal her identity to be female, as she is assigned female at birth, despite her expressing gender dysphoria and even going as far as binding her breasts to appear masculine. These kinds of tropes can also be related to tokenism because while some trans gamers may feel emotionally connected to this character, they play into a concept known as trans baiting, where the viewer takes the bait or hints that a character is trans, but the story does not explicitly reveal any transness, and in this case, there is even an opposite reveal. While tropes and the trivialization of trans experiences can be harmful, video games also provide transgender individuals with unique opportunities to explore and affirm their identities in ways that can feel difficult or unattainable in real life. One of the most powerful tools for this is character customization. Games like Sims 4 and Animal Crossing New Horizons have been celebrated for allowing players to design characters that reflect their true selves, offering control over appearance, pronouns, and self-expression. For instance, The Sims 4 introduced features such as top surgery scars, pronoun options, pregnancy options for all genders, that's huge, and the ability to decorate homes with pride flags, creating a more affirming experience for transgender gamers. Even more recently, games like Baldur's Gate 3, that was released in 2023, have pushed these features even further. This game's extensive character customization allows players to adjust details as explicitly as genitalia. Like, there's so many different versions and little tiny traits that you can adjust according to your character's genitalia, alongside more traditional traits like voice and body type. The amount of options in Baldur's Gate 3 is something that many games with character customization still lack. While it is not necessary to have options for genitalia in a T for teen game like Sims 4, it is not unrealistic to think that future games will implement more options as game design thrives as an art form and computer graphics and virtual worlds become more realistic. According to researcher Cien Rivera, such vigorous customization allows players to explore their identities in affirming and empowering ways, making the experience deeply personal and even therapeutic. These virtual playgrounds offer a safe space to experiment with gender presentation and test aspects of identity without fear of real-world judgment. Research by McKenna and their group of colleagues adds to this topic by explaining how gaming spaces and character customization provide a form of escapism, helping transgender adolescents explore how they want to look and feel more confident in their identities within a safe and super immersive environment. While simulating gender expression on a screen is not comparable to the confidence-building aspect of expression in real life, it is a great start and alternative for those who are objectively unsafe to do so in their homes, at school, or at their jobs with the threat of abuse, bullying, or becoming unemployed. Despite these developments, transgender gamers still face challenges, especially in multiplayer online gaming spaces. Online games are notorious for toxic behavior, and trans gamers frequently encounter harassment, transphobia, and other forms of discrimination from other players around the entire world. Research by Gillen and Signorella brings up the prevalence of bias and hate speech in these environments, indicating how the hostility trans players face can compromise the inclusive potential of these games. What could be an affirming experience and an opportunity to make friends and build community often becomes harmful, forcing many players to either endure the toxicity or avoid these spaces altogether. Developers are responsible for creating and maintaining inclusive environments by creating systems that prevent hate speech and harassment. According to researchers Blanco Fernandez and Moreno, inclusive design and active moderation are critical to maintaining these spaces. Features like report systems are significant, and transparency and clarification of what counts as hate speech and what will happen when another player exhibits this behavior are examples of online gaming systems that need to be prioritized to ensure the safety of their player base. Additionally, the inclusion and development of well-thought-out transgender characters can go a long way toward ensuring the gaming community is not just a hateful echo chamber. Especially when gaming spaces are filled with young cis men who are constantly bombarded online with very far alt-right-wing propaganda. Modified content has also been beneficial in enhancing representation and inclusivity in games. These creative, community-driven efforts have improved the experience for marginalized gamers who may need to see impactful representation in their favorite games. While many developers, such as developers for Sims 4 and Skyrim, encourage modding and even provide the tools for it, the legality of mods depends on the policies of individual developers and publishers. Nintendo. Mods that are free and aligned with the game's terms of service are generally legal, but those that include copyrighted material or violate terms like cheating in multiplayer games can lead to penalties. Despite these complexities, mods are a way for players to reclaim agency over their gaming experiences and practice their own skills in the art of game development. Progress in representation has also been met with backlash. Controversies have arisen over the inclusion of trans and non-binary characters in many popular games. For example, introducing the non-binary character Venture in Overwatch 2 ignited many players to deliberately avoid using the character and expressing hatred towards players who primarily use Venture in the team-based game. On the other hand, some fans expressed disappointment over Blizzard's neglect of the character and their lack of customizable skins, which exacerbates the feeling of transmasc and non-binary characters lacking visibility. And now this is my favorite topic in this. Another example of controversial character design comes from The Legend of Zelda Breath of the Wild, which was released in 2017. Where Link was purposefully designed to be androgynous. Series producer Eiji Aonuma aimed for a gender-neutral appearance to allow players to project their own identity onto Link, stating, "I wanted the player to think, maybe Link is a boy or a girl." Additionally, in this game, Link cross-dresses to enter Gerudo Town, which is required due to the Gerudo's all-female matriarchal society. This scenario touches on themes of gender fluidity, but has created controversy regarding its execution and whether it is culturally insensitive. Some view it as playful and even attractive, while others critique it for reinforcing stereotypes of deception and trivializing cross-dressing by making it comedic. However, this approach brings into question Nintendo's motives regarding profit. By designing one of its most popular characters in a way that appeals to all genders, Nintendo potentially increases its market reach and sales. Is this a genuine effort towards representation or primarily a business decision to maximize profit? Cultural perceptions further complicate this issue. In Japan, traditional values prioritize conformity. Being transgender is pathologized, and legal recognition for transgender individuals required invasive procedures, including sterilization, up until 2023, when it was found unconstitutional. Western cultures, particularly in Canada and the United States, have seen tremendous ups and downs in the past 5 years regarding transgender rights. This includes more visibility and awareness, along with the increasing number of transphobic policies in certain provinces and states. As a game where the producer intended progressive traits for the main character, despite whatever underlying motives they may have, it is interesting to see how Breath of the Wild sold over 4.5 million copies in North America and 2.2 million copies in Japan, making it the best-selling Legend of Zelda game in the series and the 4th most sold game for the Nintendo Switch. While Nintendo has designed many controversial characters, they are very talented at creating games that transgender and queer gamers love and use to build communities online. During the COVID-19 pandemic, Animal Crossing New Horizons provided a refuge for trans and queer gamers. The research by Blanco Fernandez and Moreno that I brought up earlier talks about Animal Crossing specifically and how the game became a safe space for queer and trans gamers to connect and create a sense of belonging during a time of widespread isolation, especially for adolescents who were experiencing mental health struggles due to not being able to engage with their peers in school. And as an adult going through shutdown during COVID, I can really relate to that. I loved playing Animal Crossing during shutdown, and it was a way for me to engage with my friends and play online with my friends and show each other our islands and the amazing things that we built. In the past 5 years, there have been many wins in transgender representation in video games. Games like Tell Me Why and Baldur's Gate 3 have set new standards in the industry. However, Other examples, such as Throne Orion from Hogwarts Legacy and Venture from Overwatch 2, show how representation sometimes feels shallow or performative. These examples remind us that representation in all popular media must go beyond tokenism to create actual lasting change for the safety of transgender individuals within society. Video games have been a huge part of my own life journey and a way to express myself. I have made many friends online and in real life due to video games, a lot of those friends being queer or trans. Compared to past transgender representation that heavily relied on tropes and tokenism, it is amazing to see the amount of progress being made in gaming spaces to be more inclusive. At the same time, the offline world feels dark due to recent events and rising hate towards trans and queer people. The rocky political climate of the gaming industry is reflective of the rocky political climate we are experiencing overall. However, the evidence of progress in gaming throughout the past 5 years is comforting and gives me hope that it is something that will continue online and offline.